Well, joining me here is Israel's ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hotovely. Ambassador, thank you for coming in. Just to be clear, are you now ignoring President Biden the way you ignored President Obama on settlements? When he says, de-escalate today, you're not going to?
Settlement has nothing to do to it. Well, Israel is dealing in the last 10 days with horrible, horrific terror attack on its cities, on its population, civilians, children, women, and men, sitting in bomb shelters because 3,000 rockets were fired from Gaza to Israel. Between Israel and Gaza, it's important to...
You're not going to stop. I just want to establish that.
Let me just frame the picture, because I think you need to understand where we're standing. Hamas is a terror organization with a jihadi ideology. When you look at Hamas charter, it doesn't speak about any political solution. It actually speaks about...
You framed it the way you always frame it.
No. Hamas charter, this is something that everyone knows. You can actually look and read it. It's based on anti-Semite messaging.
Yeah, but I want to talk about your aims, because
Israel with Islamic State.
We interviewed your spokesman. He repeated all these positions.
But you need to be willing to listen in order to have a dialogue.
But I want to go to your aims, because your Likud colleague, Yuval Steinitz, today has talked about having no option but to take over Gaza. Is that now Israel's position? As
far as I know, the Prime Minister is still Benjamin Netanyahu, and you need to listen to him.
Well, he has said that you can either conquer them, and that's always a possibility, or you can deter them.
We can speak about military tactics, but we can speak about the goals. I'm coming as a diplomat to speak to you about the goals. The goal is very simple: to restore quiet to our cities, to make sure Israeli kids can go to school and not to sit in shelters instead of going to school, because at the moment, schools are being fired on. And Hamas is using, in a cynical way, its political frustration. You just made an interview with Hanan Ashrawi. Well, she's not a representative of Hamas. And Hamas is the political side who's been disappointed from the fact no election at the Palestinian Authority.
But I'm asking you about Israel, not about Hamas.
And it's using Israeli civilians in order to target them. This is a thing no democratic country can tolerate.
You see, this is a refrain you often use as well, about how they're using civilians. So you know when you bomb Gaza that there are civilians there you're going to kill. Well, so you've killed 64 children in 10 days, knowingly. And that's what a lot of people find very upsetting.
So let me tell you something as a mother. Every loss of a child is a tragedy. Israel lost children in this war as well.
How many?
Israel lost 2 children.
Yeah. And
every loss, wait a second, every loss is a tragedy. But let me tell you something as a jurist. I'm coming from a legal background. And according to international law, whenever you use civilian objects and you make out of them military targets, you can actually shoot to those military targets in order to protect yourself. This is according to international law. And Israel is working by the international law.
But Hamas can say exactly the same thing. It can say its targets are military targets. It can say it's aiming for Israeli army installations, and if any civilians get killed along the way, so be it. This is what we're used to hearing.
What you're saying is a complete lie, because what is happening is Hamas is firing on civilians while Israel is firing only on military targets.
Again, I'm trying to get to your aims. Are you saying that Israel has no aim of taking over either the West Bank or the Gaza Strip?
Look, Israel withdrew from Gaza 2005, as you know. Israel removed all its settlements, so it's not about settlements. So what we're doing at the moment is we try to get back to normal life. Israel wants to live in peace. So think about my parents. My parents are in their mid-60s. They live their life, they go to work. In the last 10 days, they had to sit in shelters because their city in the middle of Israel was attacked.
At least they have shelters to sit in.
Oh, let me
Most of the people in Gaza don't have that.
So let me tell
if you want to talk about peace,
do you want to hear about the shelters in Gaza?
No, I want to talk about peace.
Oh, you don't want to talk about it. So let me tell you something.
I've been to the shelters in Gaza, so you don't need to tell me about that.
Gaza has a whole underground built by Hamas terror organization, just like the British Tube.
Okay,
think about it. All this international money being used in order to build underneath city in order to rocket Israel.
I want to talk about, how we get some progress on this. The question is,
but you need to show sympathy to the fact millions of Israelis are in shelters suffering at the moment, and they're being under attack.
And millions of Palestinians are under attack and being killed in much, much greater numbers than anybody in Israel.
If
so I
Hamas
want to talk about
firing,
what
we
the
wouldn't have been
future
in this
is.
conflict.
It goes both ways. They can say the same thing.
No, it's not.
I know that you personally...
We're a Western country, according to democratic law.
That's also a thing that we could debate at length, but the question is...
You can debate the fact Hamas is a terror organization. It's recognized by the UK government and by the US administration.
We know that you personally are not in favor of a two-state solution, are you? So the question is that the position of the Israeli state? Because you're here as the ambassador.
Let me tell you something. Israel is in favor of peace. And what we did in the last few months... No,
don't say peace. We have to say what the peace means.
Peace is the goal. Peace is the goal. We want to live peacefully with our neighbors. We want coexistence. And what is happening in the last 6 months, the Israeli Prime Minister achieved historic achievement with the Arab world, bringing the Abraham Accords. So we see more and more Arab countries getting into the circle of peace. We would like the Palestinians to join the path of peace. Every time we reach peace agreement with the Jordanians, with the Egyptians, and we have a very good peace agreements with our neighbors, it was through direct negotiation. So whenever...
Can that involve a Palestinian state?
I'm answering you the question. As long as the Palestinians, being led by a terror organization, doesn't want Israel to exist at all in any borders, this is not the issue on the table. The issue on the table is how to restore quiet to the Middle East, how to make sure the moderates are the ones to take in, not the radicals. And the Western international community should ask itself, who do you want Israel to deal with?
So
do you want
clarity,
Israel to deal with terrorists or with moderate people?
That a Palestinian state is not on the table right now.
I said as long as we are being fired by a terror organization doesn't want Israel to exist, and it's written in Hamas charter, Israel shouldn't exist. This is an anti-Semite document saying Jews doesn't have the right to live in a Jewish state.
When this war is over,
we're dealing with.
Is a Palestinian state on the table then?
Look, we're calling everyone to come and sit and negotiate, but this is not at the moment where the problem is. The problem is the Palestinian leadership.
No, I'm asking you a straight question about whether you believe in a two-state solution, and you won't give me a straight answer.
It didn't work in the past. The Palestinians always refused to accept that. You just heard Hanan Ashrawi saying it didn't lead us to a better place. So we need to now sit now and look to the problem in the eyes. And the problem is the fact that at the moment radicals are taking over the Palestinian street. Those radicals are not willing that coexistence will happen even in the cities of Israel. Even mixed cities are under a problem at the moment because those people incite them to get into a radical ideology. We're not interested in radical ideology. We're interested in peace.
I mean, what it sounds like is what you want to do is just suppress the fighting right now. And you're not really talking about a two-state solution. And so that raises the question of what effect you think
you're trapped.
Killing 210 people, 64 children has on everybody else in Palestine,
I'm not accepting
on young people in Palestine.
I'm not accepting
what effect
this.
do you think that has on their desire for peace?
Okay, so let me say that. No country in the world, and you've been hearing that for professional military people that were fighting Western wars, no country in the world was doing more to care about human rights and to be more accurate with the international law than Israel. Israel is actually sending awareness before
But you're not answering my question. You said you would.
No, I'm answering how much we care about human life.
What effect do you think having 64 children dead in 10 days will have on young people in Palestine and their desire for peace with Israel?
Let me answer to you. Because Hamas was firing to our schools and kindergartens, we could have had hundreds of Israeli children dead. The only reason we don't have that is from two reasons. One, we have Iron Dome, Israeli technology that is protecting our people. We invested the money in protecting our people instead of actually abusing international money like Hamas is doing and using Iranian backup in order to build this underground that is doing only one thing, manufacturing rockets to fire on Israeli children. And this is the reality. Now, let me share with you a personal story about what happened the last Friday in London. In my neighborhood, there were people standing with Palestinian flags and screaming in our streets, "Kill the Jews." And this anti-Semite incident was condemned by the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. And some people were under investigation because of that. But we've seen those people coming with this ISIS kind of thing.
We can't talk about this because it's a criminal investigation. So we've got to be very careful legally.
This is exactly the type of ideology that Hamas is being driven by. People that don't want Jews will have a Jewish state. This is what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with any kind of political conflict. We're dealing with radical religious ideology that doesn't want Israel to exist. And we need to fight, like London would have fought if rockets were falling on British Parliament.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Have a good evening. I hope for better days in Israel.
Thank you.